What is going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again with another review for you. This time reviewing something very different today. I am finally checking out Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Okay, I say finally checking out. Not accurate. I did watch it last time. I just wasn't reviewing it last time when it was airing last year. But this time I am finally getting around to watching and reviewing Star Trek Strange New Worlds for you guys. I'm not sure if we have too many Star Trek fans that are subscribed to our channel, but if there are, boy, do we have some fun content for you. So, yeah, starting with Strange New World Season 2, Episode number 1. Keep in mind, I'm a little bit new to reviewing the show, so there are some times where I may forget a character's name or two, so I do apologize. So definitely bear with me. This first review video may be a little bit rough, but here we go. So the first episode taking place a little bit after the way season 1 ended, which is, of course, Una gets arrested because they find out that she is genetically modified, or specifically she's part of a race called the Illyrians, who basically are people that they genetically modify themselves, but really more just so when they discover a new world, when they're colonizing a new world, they can basically modify themselves in order to basically be able to better fit into that world, rather than what was the term, terraforming, rather than terraforming another planet and having it basically match their genes. They basically terraform their own genes to match the planet, which I think makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. If you're going to move your whole move an entire species to a planet, rather than making the planet have to work for you, you get to have your body work for the planet. So it's a working ecosystem, and you're not changing it, you're not kind of ruining that ecosystem. To me, it all makes a lot of sense. But of course, there are issues with that when it comes to the Federation, specifically because of the war that happened right before World War III. I keep forgetting the name of that war, but it was the one that, of course, involved Khan. So anyways, because of that, human modifications ever since the eugenics war, that was the name of it, sorry, the eugenics war, ever since then, human experimentation, human modification has always been illegal to prevent something like this from happening again. But we have Una, a character who we find out very early on was an Illyrian, someone genetically modified, and yet she had been a member of Starfleet for so long, under the radar, going unnoticed, which Starfleet was not happy about when they found out. So, of course, now she is being court-martialed. So we have what is another courtroom drama episode. I am completely wrong. For some reason, I was about to get into the episode 2, which is the courtroom drama, but this is what's weird about this season, the way it starts out. I gave all that backstory because I was like thinking, okay, now to get into the actual plot of the episode, but then remembered that this has nothing to do with the plot of the episode. Just because the previous episode ended that season, that's not necessarily how they pick it up. However, it's not like it goes unaddressed, because you do have Captain Pike, who is not in most of this episode because he is going on a mission to basically talk to someone that Una knows, another Illyrian on their home planet, in order to get her help. And that's pretty much why Pike is out for the most of the episode. The actual plot of the episode is basically there is a distress call that Uhura picks up while the Enterprise is under inspection from La'an Singh. I always forget how to pronounce her middle name, so I'm just going to call her La'an. So they want to go and help her out. However, she is on a planet that is kind of shared between the Klingons and the humans, but it's a kind of timeshare deal, if that kind of makes sense. Once the humans are done with the planet, the Klingons take over, and when the Klingons are taken over, they don't want to see any Federation or Starfleet ships in the area at all. They want it to just be their territory only, so no Starfleet. So if a Starfleet scene were to be caught there, it could basically risk war. But Spock knows this, and knows that La'an wouldn't have sent a distress signal knowing that exact thing as well, unless it was something really, really important. So despite the fact that the Admiral tells the Enterprise that they aren't allowed to leave docking, at least not until inspection is done, Spock decides it's time to steal the Enterprise. And, this is funny because this kind of thing happens all the time in Star Trek, especially the movies. I feel like there's got to be at least two movies I can think of where that's the plot, where they're told they can't take the Enterprise, and what do? They take the Enterprise, and this definitely kind of felt like that. But it is interesting seeing Spock being the one in charge this time of taking the Enterprise. Now, the first time I watched this episode, I kind of thought to myself, like, would a younger Spock have done this? But then I'm reminded of the two-part, also a courtroom drama episode, where it's basically Pike many years later after he's had like this accident, and Spock is trying to take Pike to this paradise planet where basically he would be able to live out the rest of his life. And so I realized that was actually like, an older Spock, but still like, learning Spock. So not quite the movie Spock, but it was still like kind of a younger-ish, older Spock, if that makes sense. But regardless, it does seem like something that Spock would do even at a young age if it was something important. In the case of Lon Singh, it definitely was. So he and the crew of the Enterprise work together in order to steal the Enterprise from docking and go rescue Lon. So they get to the planet, and they discover that the Klingons there are basically using Federation tech to basically plan an attack and make it look like the Federation was the one to do it, therefore restarting the war between the Federation and the Klingon. A couple things that we get in this episode that I was not expecting. So we know that with Pike, he and most of the crew of the Enterprise had to sit out the war. And I had always assumed that I always forget his name, Doctor the main doctor on the ship. Sorry, I totally am blanking on his name, so I'm just going to refer him as to Doctor, and then Nurse Chapel. What I did not know is that the two of them were in the war. They were not part of the Enterprise at the time that the Enterprise had to sit out the war with the Klingons. And they both have some scars that they've been hiding, from season one, especially the main Doctor. Something I thought was really interesting is they use this drug while they're down there and they're doing their investigation. Once there's a point where they're kind of surrounded by Klingons, and they use this drug that's very similar to the red eye from Cowboy Bebop, the red eye drug, where it gives them that extra adrenaline boost and causes everything around them to feel like it's moving in slow motion. So you get what I think is kind of a cool fight with the two of them as they're trying to infiltrate, these Klingons with all this Federation tech. You get this fight where it's kind of clear that neither one of them are like the best martial artists. Like, it almost feels like this is done on purpose because of, the drug that they're on, where their choreography isn't as on par as the Klingons that they're, going after, but they don't need to be. It makes total sense that, they're relying on this drug to get them through. And something that gets kind of implied is that this could be an addictive drug, much like the red eye from Cowboy Bebop. So one thing that I would be very curious to see going forward in the season is if we see either one of them using it, trying to find like a less, important situation to use it. Like, every time they use it, maybe the danger is less and less, kind of indicating that they're just looking for the excuse to use it. But maybe not. It could just be a one-off like adrenaline shot drug that we only see in this one episode. But I kind of hope we see a little bit more of it. But regardless, when they finally get to the Federation ship, they send a message to the Enterprise telling the Enterprise to blow the ship up, with them still inside. And Spock, of course, being a Vulcan, wanting to go with the logical decision, agrees to do so. However, he is half human, so he waits until the very last possible minute before firing upon a Federation ship. And then when he does, the Klingons, of course, see it, and they aren't happy about Federations in their territory. So there's a brief moment where it seems like there's still about to be a war, but because we got Spock, who is essentially, as we find out, a pretty heavy drinker in this episode, as he's able to basically go toe-to-toe with drinking what they call the blood wine or something like that. He drinks blood wine with a couple of Klingons. And these Klingons are just like incredibly impressed by his ability to, drink as much as they can. Absolutely love that scene. I love Spock in this episode. I think my two favorite moments from him obviously the drinking at the end with the other Klingons, but then you have the moment where he does his thing. And it seems to be like something that a lot of new Star Trek shows have been doing, where whenever there's someone sitting at the captain's chair for the first time, they always have to figure out what their thing's going to be. My favorite was in Picard season 3 with Seven of Nine, because we don't know what her thing is, because it ends right before, it cuts away right before she says it. So I love with Spock, you're expecting something epic, but then it's just, the most Vulcan thing he could possibly say, which is, I would like the ship to leave now. Absolutely loved it. Dying laughing. Absolutely hilarious. So great first episode. Another thing I got to give a huge shout out to is the Klingon makeup. So I am kind of with the camp of people in, with Discovery. When it comes to the Klingons in Discovery, not my favorite design. I don't think I hate them as much as a lot of other people do, but they don't feel like Klingons. They feel like something entirely different, or they feel like, they feel like how Zack Snyder would make a Klingon. It feels like you could see elements of Klingons there, of course, but it just doesn't feel like a Star Trek Klingon. It feels like a Klingon that would be part of a different universe, not part of the Star Trek universe, Regardless, I'm so glad they brought back the next gen design Klingons in this episode. I absolutely love the Klingon design in this episode. I think it's modernized the perfect amount, but it still, gives you that, it still gives you like the next gen design that I think they perfected, honestly. Yeah, I know the design kind of came out before next gen, like it was a design that was used in the movies before it was used in Star Trek The Next Generation, but next gen is really where I think where I think a lot of people think when they think of like kind of Klingons, honestly. At least that's where my mind goes. That's just because I'm a next gen guy. But overall, fun episode. I would rate this episode in particular a solid B plus. And if there's anything really stopping me from giving it an A, it's really just the fact that we got it before, or the fact that we didn't get the courtroom drama that I was really expecting for the season opener, especially with it ending with Una getting like arrested. I'm like, I wanted her back, early. So I thought that was going to be how we kicked off the season. It wasn't. And I was a little bit disappointed by that. But that being said, it was still a fantastic episode. Episode 2 is the episode I was really excited for, which is, of course, the courtroom drama episode, where we basically have the trial of Una. And, something very amazing about Star Trek that, people are pretending is a new thing, but it is not. This is something that has been around since the original series. Their social commentary, they know how to pull it off. They know how to essentially take real world issues, metaphorically present those by using alien races as like analogies for day-to-day kind of social issues that we have. So this episode is no exception. Something I find just absolutely incredible about this is that you can go into this episode, it, I'm of course reviewing this as a straight white man. So obviously, when it comes to knowing like a lot of the metaphors that they're talking about in this episode on a personal level, I can't. I can't relate to any of this on a personal level. All I can do is compare it to stories that I've heard from other people. And what I find so fascinating about like a lot of the dialogue in this episode, which is if there's anything I have to like, really praise this episode for, it's the dialogue. I think this is some of the best written dialogue in A Strange New Worlds so far. I gotta praise how much like everything you hear, especially from coming from the lawyer, and then of course coming from Una's perspective, it sounds like stories you've heard before from other people who have felt marginalized in one way or another, whether it's because of the color of their skin, whether it's because of, who they love, whether it's because of their religion, for all these different reasons. You get these different stories that, that can relate to all of them. And what I love is that there's like a metaphor for almost all of these in this episode. The fact that the law may not be meant to be prejudice, but indirectly it can create prejudice, even if that wasn't the intention. And how like the best thing about the law is that it can change, that it constantly adjusts, and it doesn't like necessarily have to represent like society as a whole. I think the whole idea is that what we do to change and make it work for as many people as possible. I think the important thing is just making sure that we keep learning as we go along, and these are episodes that, or these are ideas that get brought up in this episode when referring to that kind of stuff with the law. I'm being very vague, and I'm sorry, and that's only because when it comes to specific lines are so good that I'm afraid if I try to quote too many of them, I'm just going to misquote them and completely ruin like what the person was like actually trying to say. But if you watch the episode, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about in terms of kind of like relatability of what this can be talking about in a meta standpoint. So it's an absolutely amazing episode. You get very little Pike in this episode again, but what little Pike you do get in this episode is kind of amazing. I mean, from his opening scene, he's going to the planet, of Illyrians, where basically humans cannot possibly, survive. So he's bringing like basically a breathing machine with him, and he's just so committed to getting Una the help that she needs, the only lawyer that he knows can help her, that he's basically with his breathing machine in a room when it's dying, and he refuses to leave until he can just have a moment to talk to the lawyer. Gets a chance to talk to her, convinces her to take Una's case, but there's clearly some friction between the lawyer and Una. So Nira, that was the lawyer's name. Sorry. I was kind of like scrolling through IMDb as I was like trying to remember her name. So Nira was the one that Una knew, who is now a lawyer. And so Nira is now her representative in this courtroom drama. So what follows after this is a reveal. So basically, after all this really good dialogue about like whether or not Una should be considered guilty because of the fact that she was born genetically modified, even if it wasn't her choice, she still breaks the rule, breaks Starfleet regulation. And we get this reveal that Una was the one who turned herself in because she was just so sick of hiding who she was. And it was because of this that that the jury was able to find another option that wouldn't be breaking the law, because with the fact that her situation is now known to Starfleet because of circumstances on her own, so she was the one to turn herself in other words, because she suck out Starfleet for for help, because outside of Starfleet people would always treat her differently because of her modifications. Because of all these requirements that are very specific to seeking asylum with Starfleet, that's what they're able to get her off on. They're able to get her off as someone just seeking asylum, and therefore being able to still be a part of Starfleet. I thought that was a brilliant way you could bring up an entire kind of like how like in a lot of courtroom dramas, that tends to be how it goes. You bring up the fact that you can't break one law, or you can't punish someone for one law without breaking another, and that's kind of what it was in this case. If you were to punish her for being an Illyrian, you'd be breaking another rule of Starfleet, which is the rule of granting her asylum. So I thought that was incredibly brilliant, the way they ended that court case. So another fantastic episode, very character driven episode. And again, the dialogue in this episode is some of the best written dialogue. And I feel like they had to have had some like actual legal experts writing this episode. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they've just seen enough courtroom dramas to know how it all works, but it felt like it was written by people that really knew what they were talking about. I would love to see Legal Eagle react to this episode. I'm not sure if Legal Eagle watches Star Trek, but those of you who don't know, he's a lawyer that does like reaction videos to like drama scenes in movies and TV show. He did one with Better Call Saul that was great. He did one with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which was hilarious. I recommend checking that guy out. Yeah. So that was episode 2. Another solid episode. This one I would give an A to, almost an A plus. You know what? No, I'm going to give this an A plus. I'm sorry. This was kind of a perfect episode. I can't think of a single thing that didn't work in this episode for me. You even have another amazing Spock moment that I will not spoil for you in this review. I will just say that I was busting a gut laughing from one particular scene with Spock, and you will know exactly what scene I'm talking about when you watch this episode. Now we are on episode number 3, and oh boy, there are a lot of episodes in Strange New Worlds that feel like they were taken straight out of either the original series or Next Gen or Deep Space Nine, or Voyager even. I love how to me, Strange New Worlds feels like a Star Trek show that was written for that time period, but was made today, if that makes sense. So it feels like scripts that were made like in the 90s that are only just now being shot today. And I mean that in the best way possible. And this is an episode that definitely feels like that too, because here we have a time travel episode. Now, La'an is a very interesting character because she's a very traumatized character who basically escaped captivity from the Gorn at a very young age, and doesn't really like to talk about a lot of her personal issues. So a lot of her trauma has always just kind of been like, repressed inside of her. And this is something that gets brought up in the beginning of the episode. And then kind of some shenanigans go by, and before you know it, there's a time traveler. Just randomly there on the Enterprise, and before he dies, he just tells La'an that she needs to get to the bridge before passing away and leaving this time travel like device with her. It was at that moment that suddenly there's this like temporal rift, and everything on the Enterprise changes, including the captain, because Pike is no longer the captain. The captain is none other than James T. Kirk, which I'm sure a lot of fans were excited to see. One thing that was really funny, my brother totally pointed this out to me, is that so far the only Kirk we've gotten in Strange New Worlds they've both been time travel episodes. The first one, of course, being the one where we get like an alternate version of that episode from the original series. And then the second one, of course, being this, which is La'an and Kirk traveling back in time together, because La'an goes to the Captain Kirk, tries to tell her what happened in private. But as they inspect the device, they are both sent back to the past. And I believe it was basically like modern times, like 2023, but it was like the Star Trek 2023. They're in this situation where they need to investigate, find out what change to the timeline has happened that they can prevent. Some highlights, because there's a lot that kind of happens in the episode, and I don't want to break it down bits by bit, so I'm just going to go over some of the highlights I have with this. The main one, I love seeing Kirk kicking ass at chess. That is very much like James T. Kirk. A lot of people kind of look at Christopher Pine's Kirk, and I like him. Don't get me wrong. The J.J. Abrams movies are fun. I like all 3 of them. But that being said, the thing to note is that he's a different character from Kirk. Chris Pine's Kirk is not the same Kirk as William Shatner's Kirk. They are 2 very different people. And Chris Pine's Kirk is really more of a flanderized, what people who don't watch Star Trek think Kirk is. And that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Don't get me wrong, because it's a completely different timeline. It makes sense that this would not be the same Kirk as the Kirk that we know from the original series. So this is a kind of a similar situation where it's another Kirk that grew up in a different timeline. So it's a Kirk that we're kind of only just now getting to know. But it is interesting to note that aspect is the same. Him being really good at chess. In fact, him just being kind of a nerd in general is still intact with his character. And I think that's kind of brilliant. Another thing that I thought was kind of cool in this episode is that at one point his brother's name gets dropped, Samuel Kirk, and he finds out that he's alive, and that's kind of what gives Kirk a complete 180, because he at first is like, why should I do anything? If I do something, my timeline gets erased. And who's to say which timeline is real and which time isn't? So I do like that the one thing that kind of made him change his mind was finding out about his brother, and really kind of understanding that the future that he's missing out on is a utopian future. I thought that was cool. And the other thing I got to talk about with this episode, though, is that ending, because it was a brilliant written ending. but I hated it so much because of how brilliant it was. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Lon has so much pent up, like, or so much concealed like emotion, so much trauma that she hasn't really talked to a psychiatrist about. And so finally she finds someone that she connects with, which is of course Kirk of all people, which is, I thought, beautiful. But unfortunately, that Kirk doesn't make it through. And when she restores the timeline, the Kirk that we all know and love, or the one that we all know and love, but she's never met, that's the one that we have back. That's the Kirk that we have back now. And the problem is he doesn't remember any of the events that have taken place. So you have this moment where there's hope that the two of them can still get to know each other, but it's definitely not going to be like what it was. That experience that they had together, it'll never be to him what it was to her. And so the way she kind of breaks down at the end, I thought was just amazing acting on her part. Just absolutely brilliant. The other thing I really loved in this episode was getting to see a very young version of Khan. It is kind of funny. I do like how they're kind of tying it into Picard season 2. One line, I don't know if I misunderstood what they were actually trying to say, but they referenced the temporal wars from Star Trek Discovery season 3, which was also mentioned in that season as well. So they mentioned that, and then through mentioning that, I think the Romulan who's basically causing this time shift, I think I hear her mentioning the fact that this was supposed to happen in the 90s. And I think I remember that in the original series. Now, definitely, if I'm remembering this wrong, let me know in the comments below. But if I remember correctly, in the original series, it was the 90s when the eugenics war, like, basically took place. Now, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was the case. So I'm wondering if what they're suggesting is that, the current Star Trek now isn't taking place in an alternate timeline, but rather a time shift where, like, all the events still happen. They just happen in completely different years after a certain point. I'm wondering if that's what they were trying to imply with that line, but I can't say for sure. But I do like the idea of the temporal wars being mentioned again. It is something I think would actually make a pretty cool series if they ever wanted to, explore that whole area of Star Trek. But yeah, again, another really solid episode. Not as great as the second one, but still a really solid episode. And I would probably give this one a solid A. So there you have it. We have a B, A plus, and then an A episode from the beginning of the season. Again, sorry, this was kind of a rough review. I still am really bad when it comes to a lot of the names of Star Trek. I've only just now recently been getting back into the series because beginning of the year I rewatched Next Generation, and from there I've just been kind of binging a lot of different Star Trek here and there. So I'm really trying to get fully back into the series again. So just be patient with me as I try to memorize these names, because as you guys all know, I'm already really bad at names as it is. And of course, when it comes to Star Trek, they get really creative with a lot of them. It's why I have to have like a separate sheet over here for looking at this kind of stuff. But anyways, that all being said, I really enjoy this series, so I look forward to reviewing it more as it goes on. But of course, guys, at the end of the day, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know your thoughts on these episodes in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. But of course, guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.